The Palace of Westminster is home to one of the busiest parliamentary institutions in the world. Thousands of people work here and visit every day to engage in the political process. More than 1 million people, including 40,000 schoolchildren, pass through its doors each year. And millions of tourists come to see one of the most iconic and recognizable buildings in the world. Completed in the mid-1800s by the architect Charles Barry, many of the palace's features, including much of its impressive cast-iron roof, have never undergone major renovation. The cumulative effects of pollution and the lack of maintenance has caused extensive decay to stonework. A combination of leaking roofs and corroded gutters and downpipes is damaging stone-carved ceilings. Some of the tiled floors have decayed so much they could become unsafe. The heating, ventilation, plumbing and electrical systems are extremely antiquated, and fire safety improvements are needed. In 2012, a new study indicated that unless significant restoration work is undertaken, major irreversible damage may be done to the palace, and part of our nation's most valued heritage will be lost forever. So what's being done to tackle these problems and to ensure the palace continues as a fully functioning parliament building fit for the 21st century? With the agreement of both houses of parliament, a number of options for a longer-term plan for restoration and renewal are being considered. In the meantime, because the damage and decay to roofs, floors and stonework is so severe, work is already underway to protect the building for years to come. And work on the aging mechanical and electrical systems could not be put off any longer because the risk of system failure was so high. But at this stage, only 15% of the highest risk building service plant rooms are being replaced to buy time while a longer-term approach is identified. All of this work has to fit around the daily business and sittings of Parliament in order to minimize disruption. But this means it's taking much longer and adding significantly to the overall cost.
We have to balance our need for doing the work, the amount of disruption, against the risk of the services failing and the risk of the fabric having irreparable damage and deterioration occurring to it. Part of the design of this building was to have cast iron guttering set into the stonework, which means you can't see it or access it in the same way that you would on most modern buildings. And what happens is that we don't know when those cast iron gutters start to fail. We won't know probably until years after it's actually happened, and then we'll be tracing a leak back, looking at deterioration and working out where it started from. And that's a general problem that we have on this building, and we have to address that. This is Central Lobby. It's the centre of Parliament. You can see both houses, chambers from here, and the damage that you can see is up there. You look at the water damage, you see how the decorative area has been affected by it. If we don't address that, over time what will happen is that stone will decay further and bits will fall off. I have to stress it is safe at the moment though. In respect of the House of Commons, the chamber has stonework that needs to be cleaned. It has windows that need to be addressed. They've not been looked at since the war. We've got to do something about the relative humidity in that area to stop the deterioration. The engineering systems that support that are not actually up to the job that they are of a modern system today. Basically, the whole of the chamber needs to be looked at.
Well, we're standing in the House of Lords chamber. Although it looks very glamorous, a very beautiful room, it does have serious underlying problems. It has difficulties with the windows, which have to be repaired so that they don't let in water and so that we can reduce the heat loss. And the woodwork has become dried out by poor control of the temperature and the relative humidity. There's work to be done on sculpture, on the ceiling. We have to scaffold and really take over the room completely.
We're in Westminster Hall, which is the main entrance to the Houses of Parliament, and the main issues with the hall revolve around the medieval roof, which dates from the 15th century, and the stonework itself, which dates from the 19th century. These are essential repairs because the staining that you can see on the walls is 19th century atmospheric pollution, which contains sulfur, and when that gets damp, it turns into acid, which actually starts to erode the stone, and we've found in several areas that there are pieces of stone which are ready to fall off. We're going to clean the stonework. Once we've cleaned it, we're going to assess it for repairs, and then carry out the repairs. The work itself is in several phases, and the first phase has been completed, which is the north wall and the Jubilee window. There's a huge issue in here with encaustic tiles. As you progress from St Stephen's here into Central Lobby, that's got encaustic tiles on it, into the two corridors going to the House of Commons and to the House of Lords, and then into Royal Gallery, where we've got a vast quantity of encaustic tiles. We think most of them have been down for at least 150 years. They're very well worn indeed. And when they wear, they start to delaminate, the bases start to go and they wobble. And so we have a huge health and safety problem with that. What you're seeing here is the tiles being replaced very nearly in their entirety. They're handmade, each one is slightly different. And so the problems inherent in getting a flat floor are enormous. They have to be very carefully laid in a traditional way, and the slates in between have to be renewed as well. Where you can see on the surface that there are cracks, that usually indicates underneath that there is some movement.
If nothing is done, if we're in that world where we're not able to do any work at all, the palace would grind to a halt. Parts of it would fail, some much sooner rather than others, but more specifically the services would fail. They are being constantly attended to and looked after by my team, and we're very good at that. But there's only so much you can do in repairing and fixing. We need to replace. We have a responsibility, a duty, to make sure it is maintained and kept in the right condition and prepared for future use.
While longer-term plans for the restoration and renewal of the Palace of Westminster are being considered, the essential maintenance and conservation work continues. To find out more, please watch the other videos in this series